Okay, so I'm going to teach y'all about athletic identity. The definition of athletic identity is having a strong connection to your identity towards your athletic self. Like if someone asks you who you are, what you are, you respond with for example, me, I would respond with I'm a football player. Um, it it's um it's tied to their self-definition. So again, if you ask them who they are, they'll say they're whatever they sport they play, position they play, all this other stuff. And it also ties to their self-worth. So people with strong athletic identities, they'll often tie how they feel throughout the day to how well they did in their game or their sport or their practice. So you'll often see a lot of people that have high athletic identity kind of moping throughout the day when they have a tough game or a long practice or they just had a bad day. Today we're going to talk about how athletic identities form, and then we're going to bridge that into how it correlates with injuries, because I mean, I can relate to that well, so I thought might as well learn about it. And then at the end, we're going to talk about how that correlates with retirement and life after their sport and life satisfaction after. So the development of athletic identity kind of starts with you being really good at the beginning. So it starts from a very young age. When if you come out and you're really good at a sport, you're gonna fall in love with that sport. You're gonna start tying yourself to that sport. And then as you grow up and you grow into the sport, it transitions into high school and football or high school and college, which is why you kind of see a lot of kids like stop playing other sports and focus in on their one sport that they play. Like, for example, me, I played football. You can think of other people that quit football to play baseball or basketball to play baseball or any other sport. Um, it also individual variations, the personal beliefs about being an athlete influence how they transition to affect individual athletic identity formations. So how the person thinks they are at a sport. So if for example, if they're stubborn that they're really good at this sport, they're gonna sit there and continue saying um, like I'm a football player, I'm a football player, I'm a football player. And you can kind of see this through like a kid that had one very good game and kind of ride on that their whole life and stuff like that. Um, and it also is affected throughout when they grow up by three factors: the role, like how important the sport is, the group, so how the people around you say you are at that sport, and yourself, obviously the individual variation. High athletic identity has pros and cons to both of them. Obviously, the pros are like you want to get back, you're going to grind and rehabilitation and stuff like that. It also kind of helps coping because you deal with that through injuries and you kind of develop a healthy coping mechanisms throughout all those injuries. And often leads to better outcomes because those people that have high athletic identities are going to sit there and focus and continue on um like the rehab stuff and take it seriously rather than someone who could care less about it. But there's also cons to this and that there's increased risk taking with injuries. For example, you'll see this in a lot in football when a kid gets hit in the head and they'll kind of sit out for a play or two and then come right back in and not tell people about the concussion symptoms, which is kind of the biggest factor in the cons. Um, they can also they hide the psychological symptoms that they can feel and hide the intensity of the injury that they feel. Like you'll see players go up to the coaches like, "Nah, I feel good," and their ankles and 90 degrees, and it's like you're not good. And then while it does help athletes help rehabilitation, the other hand is they can push themselves a little too hard and cause rehabilitation or rehab to kind of set back. So it has that kind of there's a give and a take to both sides of high athletic identity and with injuries. And then the last one, how it correlates with retirement. Um, Athletic identity does not really have a direct correlation between high athletic identity and satisfaction of life after it. Um, I read this in some article that said that talked about a lot of D1 former D1 athletes. But the factor that did have a correlation with retirement and life satisfaction was um, like the search for life, the search for a meaning in life. For kids that don't have a search for meaning in life and just find that in football, they often kind of like they lose themselves when they retire and they don't have that football and that thing to continue chasing if they don't. And like those kids that just only see themselves as football players often struggle after life. And then predictable retirements such as graduations tend to associate better with life satisfaction. Obviously because it's like you expect it to happen and you can see it happening, so you can kind of brace yourself for it. But some you can also see like it is the unpredictable side of it, like a injury that ends your career. It obviously it hurts life satisfaction because that's when you find a lot of the guys that are like, oh, in high school, like I was a guy, like all these great things about them in high school, but like they haven't done much after it. They don't have a very satisfying life after it, and they continue to just kind of mope around and kind of have just a sad life because their injury ended their whole identity and they didn't get a chance to grow their identity into more than just being an athlete. Um, that's all I really have. Is there any questions or comments that y'all have about athletic identity or any of the other things I talked about?
I have a question.
Okay, what is it?
How how do you think athletic identity impacts an athlete's mental health?
I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but it's like high athletic identity on the one hand can be very good for the mental health of an athlete because if they're playing really well and they're doing really well in practice and in the games, then this like it'll obviously have a good mental health. But if they're sucking and they have high athletic identity, then they're obviously going to kind of be more towards the depressed side. And that also bridges into injuries. If you have high athletic identity and you're hurt or you can't go out there and compete, then you're going to have some sort of symptoms of depression and stuff like that. Anything else?
I have a question. So, the people who have a high athletic identity, how do those that struggle with it and have a hard time, how do you figure out to help them or with that struggle?
Like how to build a athletic identity or
Well, how to help them achieve who they are without the athletic identity. Does that make sense? Like,
so it's just like searching for a meaning of life. Like a lot of people have that struggle. Just like you can go into religion or you can find hobbies outside of sports, like golf or other stuff like that. Like for me, it's weightlifting. I love weightlifting or other stuff. And you can find a meaning in life like outside of it, like your brother or your like, all those other things, your boyfriend, all these other things that kind of build your identity. So it's not just you're an athlete. Is that all the questions we have?
Yes.
yes.
Right.